When you reach out to others and share who you are and what you do you find that you're moved to provide some kind of statement that includes your worth or your value? Before you can offer an opinion, do you have a need to provide background information or justification for what you are about to say? Perhaps you withhold saying anything because you don't want to feel misunderstood, or sometimes, often in my case, being way out there in your thoughts. Today, we are exploring our business persona and how we represent who we are in the working world. The podcast today is a chance for me to share a little bit more about what I do and how I reach out to others, but it'll be done through the eyes and reflection by my sister, Charlene. She's been a business coach and entrepreneur who's had her own law firm, and she's supported many businesses and people over the years. From my perspective, I've been a dance educator and entrepreneur for over 4 decades, a Tai Chi instructor, and an empathic healer. I am passionate about movement and how to support people to move gracefully and with agility and strength. I enjoy empowering others to find their voice as a result of moving well and being able to share their voice to others because they were energized and strengthened by their expanded movement. If you are considering how to live a more authentic life through your business and your personal dreams and desires, this conversation is for you. Together, we will explore the approach to take as a business owner or entrepreneur, but also with your personal story and your outreach to others. As the season is devoted to transformation, your experience of change and inspiration will be our goal throughout the podcast. You're listening to Be Well with Michelle Greenwell, sponsored by the Cape Breton Tea Company and Dance Debut Inc. Hello, Charlene. Thank you for coming to share this time together.
Hi, Michelle. I've been so excited to be able to join you on one of your podcasts, and I look forward to doing this series with you. I'm very proud of your businesses, and so it's exciting to do this. So thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here. So some of the things that you've mentioned is about transformation and about business and how we can look at things differently. And that's something I'm always excited to talk to entrepreneurs and business people about in their businesses. And one of the things that I think people tend to do in business is always look at talking about themselves and being excited to tell people about everything that they do and everything about themselves. And they're so excited to say, well, I'm this and I do this and I have this and here's all my credentials. And you'll listen to people describe themselves to their customers, and it's all about them. It's all about me. And one of the things that's really transforming for a business person and for their business is to realize that it's not about them. It's about the customer and about thinking outside of themselves for their business and thinking instead about the customer and realizing that, you know what, it's not about you. It's about the other person. And so part of what I wanted to talk about today was talking about what a business person can do differently approaching their business. And it's both a way to approach business and it's a way to approach life. Excuse me. So in business, we often tend to think about what it is that we sell, what our service is, what we do. But instead, if we turn that around and shift our thinking from ourselves to what it is that the person that we're giving it to does or wants or is looking for, that's quite transformational. Even when we're writing our about page, when we're describing what it is that we're about, if we write it in terms of what the person that we're giving it to is looking for, that's quite transformational. And say if you're looking at your social media page or your web page, when someone is searching for what they're looking for and your page is describing what they're looking for, they'll all of a sudden say, hey, they get me. they understand me. This is the person who can provide exactly what I'm looking for because they've described it in their about page. And all of a sudden, you're their solution and you get them. And now you're exactly what they need because you've described it in how you've described yourself, and you're their solution all of a sudden. Instead of being about me, about yourself, you're now about them. And that all of a sudden makes you a connection. So that's transforming, and that's changing, and that's a mental shift for the business person. um, and so that's really a way as a business person that you can transform yourself. um, so that's something very different and very very life-changing for a business person. And that taking that little mental shift, that little step in your how you start your day off as a business person can be it's not a cost. It's not anything you have to spend any money on, but it can result in dollars changing over time in how you do things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I was just, as you were, just that last phrase that you were talking about, I was thinking about the start of my day in, yes, I've got the tasks that I have that need to get done, but I'm also thinking about what is the outreach that my work is going to accomplish as the day progresses. Um, and
Mm-hmm.
and when I was thinking about how to start this season 3, one of the things that I do is I pull a card from my card deck or maybe from one of my other decks. But if I was to do that for the podcast today, this would give people an idea of how to change that scope from that to-do list, that tunnel vision, or the I part into how we can think in that bigger capacity. So can I share the card with you?
Sure, I'd love to hear it.
So this is from the affirmations for the body and biofield deck. And for those not familiar with it, it's got a black cover on it. I'm just going to describe because podcast you wouldn't be seeing. But there's a picture on the front, which is known as baby and child, is what Tanya Levy had put in there. And so Tanya's idea of how we can be the mother to the ideas, but also how we can be the child to the ideas and how can we can play. And I'm going to bring that to, this is a card that I get very often when I'm thinking about how to expand my business to the people I want to reach. And it's called Open Spaces Within. And it has a big black hole in the center of it. It's like you're looking into space, but you're looking through a flower because it's all yellow hues. But the affirmation on it is when we focus on connections in a linear fashion, we miss the power of the space between and around. And I thought it was kind of fitting for the way our discussion's going today, because typically we do look at our website and the way that we market ourselves or put our business card out there, and we put it out there with our idea of here's our credentials or here's what you'll find about me. And really when you start to think about those wide open spaces, what are the potentials that people are looking for? What's the opportunity they want by being engaged with you? Yeah. Thank you for letting me share that part.
It's so interesting that you pulled that card. One of the things that I had wanted to talk about in this discussion that we had was talking about timelines, or whether we talked about it today or in this series, was timelines. And that really it's not about timelines, or that for me, my career has not been a timeline. My career has been more of a time, whether you call it a circle or a time tree or a time branch. There's no line about it. And that maybe when we started the career, and if you look at my career, that I started as a lawyer, and I very much saw a timeline, that it was very linear, that there would be this one line that went from start to finish, but there in fact is no line, that there's very much a map that goes all over the place, and that there's no start and finish. It goes everywhere, and you have to be very adaptive. And so when you say timeline, I thought that was quite interesting, because um, there is no line. Just like when I practiced law, said, "What kind of a lawyer are you?" And people expect you to say, "Well, I'm a family law lawyer, or a real estate lawyer, or a criminal law lawyer, or this kind of lawyer." And I would always say, "Well, I'm a good lawyer." Like I help people. It doesn't matter what label you put on it. It's it's how you do the service, or how you provide the goods. It's the person that you are, not the label that you put on it. That's, to me, the difference that it makes. And it's not the timeline. It's all of the things that you do over that time. Right? So there's a pattern in there. So I think the timeline is interesting, because really there's no line. It's all space and time in there, but there really there's no line. And I think when we start off, we maybe think there's a line, there's a start and a finish. And when you veer off of that line, when you start off, you feel this loss and disappointment, because you think that you've done something wrong, or there's a loss, but there isn't. And that's where life gets more enriched, and your life gets enriched, because that's where you find those things that you never expected. And that's part of what we wanted to talk about today, is that's where you get the opportunity to make a difference, and to enrich other people's lives, because you fell off that line, and things went astray and went different, and life changed from that univision that we started off with. And for me, I had an opportunity to go different than the pattern that I always thought I would have, and did have a chance, and continue to have a chance to do things differently, and to experience life differently. And some of those things have changed from the perfect pattern that we saw. And certainly that means that some things in life are more difficult and more challenging, whether with health, and with finances, and with life experiences. But that's also where I'm more appreciative of things in life. And I recognize where I have more opportunity and more benefits than other people in the world. And I also have an opportunity to help people differently in the world. And that is life changing. And that is transformative. Getting back to your themes for this year as well.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, and we'll be able to dive into this as we go across the season, because you've helped people in very different ways, because of the law knowledge that you've had, but not because you acted as a lawyer when you did it. It's because of the thought patterns and the process that you had to be able to think the other vision, and also to think about, and that's the empathy and sympathy for others, the ability to realize where they may be sitting, and then how they might be looking for assistance, and then the gifts that you have that you're able to offer. And that's, that comes from business. It comes from jobs that we had. It comes from those first experiences, especially as entrepreneurs, because both of us, we grew up with entrepreneur parents, but also entrepreneur great-grandparents. And so when you look back at all the ways they transformed themselves to be able to put food on the table, when we were younger and we were taking those first jobs, some of the crazy things that we did, and then those skills, those first skills, and the first bit of errors, and the first bit of learning that came out of that. But that also really helped us to navigate in such a different way. And you went in and had that law mind. I went thinking I was going to be a psychologist. And as soon as I got in there, year 3 was, I cannot do this job. There's no way. And, and Dad said, you finish your degree, because you at least have that behind you, and then whatever. And, then I went down the road of being a dance instructor and studio owner. Yes, psychology came in there, but it gave me a different viewpoint. But it certainly wasn't a linear path, that's for sure.
Hmm. Well, and I loved law, and there's definitely people that I know I helped in that realm, and that education was very beneficial and very helpful, and there's a lot that I'm very grateful that I was able to do there. Um, and there's a lot to be said for the education and the skills there, and mediation as well. That's definitely a skill that I can use all of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And the same with the ability to research and understand the law, and to be able to have the confidence to speak up for other people is huge. And being able to recognize when other people aren't able to speak up for themselves,
Mm-hmm.
and to have the benefit of having that background. But certainly way before then, um, just having the spirit to be able to, whether it's sit out with a lemonade stand as a kid, or pick cherries on our grandparents' orchard for 25 cents for a bucket, or whatever it might be,
Our haunted
you
house,
know.
our haunted house around the uh, the what's that called? The
the, the
laundry,
deck,
the laundry,
the clothesline.
the clothesline. Yeah, yeah. I had forgotten about that till just now. Yeah. What was that? 5 cents to get in, so you could feel grapes and
Yeah,
spaghetti.
and stick your hands in gross grapes or spaghetti and things like that. There's all sorts of places where, just having that strength of spirit, but also knowing where other people don't have that confidence or that support, or that feeling of safety,
Mm-hmm.
is huge. And there's certainly a lot of places, both here and in other places around the world, where, whether it's women in unsecure places, or children, or, people who don't have money or homes or food insecurity, whatever it might be, are really, um, not in a place where they ever feel that sense of security or safety. And it's really, it's really gives you a sense that we come from a place of privilege, whether that's because I mean, we're not rich by any sense of the imagination, but we come from a place of privilege just because of where we were born, and the country we live in, um, the society that we live in. We're really advantaged, and we're blessed.
Mm-hmm.
And I've certainly had that feeling over the last, several years, even having had a lot of change in circumstances. I know that I'm blessed differently than a lot of places in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really been impressed on me. So it's interesting to see, and I've had the opportunity to, be able to meet people from across the world who haven't had that experience, and who struggle daily to, just be able to find food for their family, or to be able to um, to have a roof over their head. Uh, and it's very humbling
Mm-hmm.
to know that there's people still in this century who live not knowing if their family will have food today. And you wonder, how is that possible, when we know that, we might feel like, we'll say, oh, I'm starving today, but we know that, that's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
you know, you know Maybe we don't have the snack that we want, but we're not starving.
Mm-hmm.
In
Mm-hmm.
the sense that people truly are starving,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
truly don't have a roof over their head, when maybe we don't have the same luxury that we wanted to have today. It's really different.
And I'm thinking, with where we open today, with, what do you tell people about who you are? And then taking the time to reflect back on, what do people need to hear from you? What is the
Mm-hmm.
key piece that is helpful. So it could be as simple as I hear you and I see you. And that might be everything to somebody. But then the other thing could also be, what skills do I have that you require? So yes, I have this long list of the linear pieces, but that might not be very helpful for the person standing before you or the person looking for assistance. And to be able to reflect on then what are the actual skills that you gained as a result of your experience or education or background. And then how does that assist going forward? Mm-hmm.
I find I never introduce myself explaining who I am. I find it's very intimidating to other people if I tell people about my background. And that maybe sounds snotty to say that now. But it is intimidating to people. People are intimidated if they hear that you're a lawyer. That
Mm-hmm.
shuts people down.
Mm-hmm.
So I never introduce myself that way.
Mm-hmm.
I say I'm Charlene. I say where I'm from. I'm a mom. Um, I've I like to help people. I'm I enjoy music. I like to write. I enjoy my family. I enjoy different things. I'll tell them things that are less intimidating. But if you tell them something that you know is either controversial or sort of has a high intimidation factor, it does shut people down
Mm-hmm.
because you don't know the place where someone is coming from or starting from. And if you start with something where you know that it might put people a bit with their back up, then all of a sudden you've already put a block up,
Mm-hmm.
and you've prevented them from letting them know, or letting them be free to tell you about themselves and about what their needs are,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and letting them open up. So if you leave it for the other person to open up first, or open up about how it is you might be able to help or what their needs are, that opens you up more to being able to be about them
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and get back to um, being able to put yourself into that place of where you're going to be able to provide those goods or services, or fill those gaps that, if you're that business person who's wanting to be doing that, um, you're able to do that. If you start off with the list of all about me, then maybe you already put up those roadblocks of them thinking, I'm not going to be able to afford that. They're just trying to sell, uh, or they're more educated than I am, or they're wealthier than I am, or they're whatever it might be, that they
Mm-hmm.
already feel like they're not going to be able to compete against, or be on the same level, whatever it might be that they may have as their objections, or their biases, or their fears. Those things will all be running through their heads while you're explaining yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So some more things where I would avoid those things.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Start with things that are more base level of, you know, I like gardening, but I'm really bad at it.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe if someone is good at it, like, I like gardening, but I'm more of a brown gardener.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And to kill those things, which I try to help to live. But man, if someone could help me with that, that would be great.
Yeah.
you know Not to say that I'm trying to put myself down, but I recognize that's a weakness in me, but I would like it to be a strength.
Mm-hmm.
um but I enjoy taking pictures of beautiful gardens, and I
Mm-hmm.
think some of my pictures are good, but I also enjoy learning from others how to make them better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm a hobby photographer, but I'm not a pro photographer, but I love going out and doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If someone else wants to go with me, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
I enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's maybe an opener.
Mm-hmm.
uh,
Exactly. Yeah.
So
And
trying to find something that's common ground.
yeah, and I'm thinking about, you know, as a Tai Chi instructor, one of the things Master Moy instilled was you taught from your heart, and you were not to gain any monetary gain from your time as an instructor. And so that approach really has sifted over into everything else that I do, which can not be advantageous if you're an entrepreneur necessarily, but from the perspective of um, what happens in a class, it's really changed the approach from I'm here as one of you, I'm a volunteer, I'm just here in the class as everybody else, but I'm here to help to cultivate an experience. So with what expertise I might have, it gets us started. But the expertise that everyone else has in the class is the experience of their own body. And so as we're moving through patterns, to be able to ask people, what do you experience? How does that work? What else do you need in order for you to be able to get that movement better? Then it creates this conversation of people all having the knowing and the knowledge to be able to come back.
Mm.
And I think that approach, I brought that approach actually into teaching dance and did a lot of collaborative work that way. And I've noticed since that time, that's the best part of being an entrepreneur is the collaborative pieces that I can bring into any conversation. And that really does provide for that equal playing field of the expertise of the other people, but also their interests, which is
Mm.
as you were describing. And so it's an interesting idea to bring forward is where that collaboration can really go. And then when you're trying to serve rather than try to focus on your receiving, um, it transforms that um, relationship in such an enriching way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What I found interesting, even working as a lawyer, so I was one of the few lawyers from my graduating class who started off, I went from articling right away to being um, being my own boss. I started off with my own practice right away in Red Deer in Alberta. And almost everyone else went to the large firms or larger firms. They wanted to join a firm, they wanted to article with a firm, then join the firm, and then work their way up and become partner and everything. And I I articled with a sole practitioner, and then eventually, within a short time, went out on my own and built up my own practice and clientele. And I found that really it was quite um, relatively quick to build up by word of mouth referrals. And my colleagues from law school would say, well, how can you do that? How is that possible? And it's, well, it's just by working with one and them telling someone else, and it's just by being good to people, and it's how you treat people and learning with them. And one of the things that I did was I had, I always told, I had farming clients, and I would tell them, that the teapot's on, when calving season is done and you happen to be downtown, my teapot is on. And my friends would say, well, isn't that kind of weird? I say, well, no, it's just, your door is open and you just
Yeah.
be friendly,
Yeah.
and with my seniors, if I did wills and estates planning with them, it was the same thing that, when they came in, that, the first thing is you put the teapot on and you sat and you chatted a little bit, and you knew that they had grandkids and what they were doing in the community. And it was about being about the person and not about the billable hour so much. And maybe
Mm-hmm.
that didn't maybe make you as rich and as money focused as I might have been if I was in a big firm. But it meant that I knew every one of my clients by name, and you knew
Mm-hmm.
them if you went out in the street. And it meant it was much more engaging, and you felt very much like they cared about me and I cared about them.
Mm-hmm.
And it built a clientele very quickly for myself anyway. And
Mm-hmm.
it felt very comfortable,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
you know,
So
and I
let's
certainly love that.
So let's segue that thought process into what's going to be a special for the podcast season, which is you're going to be talking about compassionate living, and you'll have your own section in the month when we release the podcast. Do you want to talk a
Mhm.
little bit about what that's going to look like?
So compassionate living goes back to our high school days, and someone that you knew and I knew. Um, and it also connects to Facebook, strangely enough. One day in Facebook, I got this bizarre friend request, and I never ever expected or never accepted um, unknown friend requests. But for whatever reason, this one day I did, and I answered this friend request, and talked to this person for a little while, and then it was connected to a friend way back from high school. That a common friend was a friend back in high school, and happened to be someone that you knew from high
Mm-hmm.
school,
Mm-hmm.
right? Dwayne,
Mm-hmm.
Dwayne Higgins. And after a couple of weeks of chatting to this person that I didn't know, and we got to chatting daily, this person, Stephen, I finally messaged Dwayne from high school and said, I never talk to anyone I don't know. But he happens to also be a friend of yours, Dwayne, from way back. Do you remember me? He said, yeah, I remember you. I went to school with your sister. I said, yeah. I said, so this person that I'm chatting with, is he for real, or is he like a scam? Because he's all the way from Malawi in Africa. And Dwayne said, you know what, Char? Absolutely. He's for real. I worked with him in an orphanage in Africa. We both worked there, and he's the real deal. You can trust him. I said, okay, good, because my heart told me I could believe in him, but, it seemed a little, just, I've never just chatted from out of the blue. So once Dwayne had said, this is someone you can trust and believe in, he's 100%, authentic and just a sweetheart of a guy, by all means, then I said, okay, good. So I started chatting with this person. His name was Stephen Moyo, and he and his wife lived in Malawi in Africa, which is the one of, if not the poorest of the poorest countries in the world. Um, and at the time, his wife was um, 8 months pregnant, 8.5 months pregnant, and due with um, they already had 3 kids at the time, and she was pregnant, and their baby was due anytime. And we were chatting, and that was almost 6 years ago now.
And when you
And
say chatting, you were texting because they don't have the ability to talk by phone. So you're doing this through texting.
that's right, we were messaging on Messenger, Facebook Messenger.
Mm-hmm.
So we started messaging almost daily. And Stephen, um, at that time, um, he wasn't a minister at the time. He preached. He helped with the ministry in their church.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't a full-time minister at the time. He later became the minister of their church, but he wasn't a full-time minister at the time. But he was sending me, like, he sent me pictures of Maria, his wife, at her level of pregnancy, and pictures of their kids, and we chatted. And my background before I was in law was, I had a BA honors in sociology, so very interested in culture and society and cultures and how people work, really, and how cultures work. So it was almost like a sociology and anthropology exchange, with how did their family work? How did their village work? How did their meals and their teaching and their education and their transportation, just everything, like, and we just back and forth in their church, and we just talked about everything. And our time difference, it was depending on daylight savings times, was either 9 or 10 hours. And I don't sleep at night usually, so when I was up at midnight, it would just be their morning. So we would just be texting or messaging like constantly, when I was up at night, his first thing in the morning about, their kids going off to school. And I would eventually figure out that they would actually be walking for many kilometers to get to their school, and to get home, and for kilometers to get to their medical center. And his pregnant wife would either walk or take a bike when she went into labor to get to their hospital. It's like, she would do what? And they thought that she maybe was going to have twins or triplets. It's like, and she's going to what? She's going to walk or ride on a bicycle, like, out to here to get to this. It's like, you've got to be kidding me. And then I started learning about how they lived and how little they had, and that they lived in a mud hut, that he was slapping mud and grass on the side of it in their rain and flooding lightning season, trying to keep it together with water coming in the roof, living with his mom and his grandma in there as well, and their 3 kids, trying to feed them and figuring out how to get his pregnant wife to the hospital that was 11 kilometers away on either foot or bicycle when she was going to have these babies, and learning about how they lived, and yet that they were one of the happiest people on earth, and that
Mm-hmm.
they cared about their congregation and all these things. It's like, oh my God, like, how do they keep doing this?
Mm-hmm.
And eventually they had their babies. First, he sent me a picture of their pregnancy scan, and I'm thinking, scan? I'm thinking, like, a scan we would have here. And it was like a sketch. It was a hand-drawn sketch of these 2 little stick babies drawn in the mummy's belly. That was their pregnancy scan. It was like, someone who had felt her belly and drawn the babies in her belly. That was the
Wow.
medical scan. Just unbelievable. Unbelievable, the difference between here and there. So I started working with him and talking to him about what they had and what they needed, and their needs were so great, and yet they're they never asked me for anything. Like, all that he asked for was prayer. If I could join them in prayer, that she deliver safely, and join him in prayer that that they have food. He never asked for money. And they had no safe water supply. They carried water in jugs on their head from several kilometers away from a borehole that had very high salt content water. That he told me about all these things because I asked about them. But he never asked for money. Um, but then I sent them money so that they could pay for a bike taxi to get to the hospital, which was still several kilometers away. And I can't imagine being hugely pregnant and riding on the back of a bicycle to get to the hospital. I can't imagine that. It was bad enough driving in a car going over a set of railroad tracks getting to the hospital pregnant. So I can't imagine that.
Yeah.
But then I started to fundraise, to raise money for what's called hippo rollers, to help them to roll water the several kilometers to get to their home, instead of several of them carrying the pails and buckets back and forth for water, and things like this. And over time, I've started learning different things to help them. And there's lots and lots of stories we can talk about.
And that's what that
But now we're
podcast is
full.
for.
Yeah, absolutely. now we're forward almost 6 years, and so much has changed over that time. We've done things that have helped the village some, and more importantly, the family, but there's been a lot of losses. And in the last year and a half, there's been also Hurricane Ada, and more recently, Hurricane Freddie or Frederick, the latest one or cyclone, I guess it was, that's been very, very devastating. In the last month and a half, that one went through. That was the biggest cyclone in recorded history in that hemisphere of the world. So absolute devastation that they've suffered. So now I'm on a mission to help change their lives and bring it back, because they're suffering immensely. So that's a huge mission for me, because for me, outside of our personal family, to me, they are family, and they're suffering, and there's no need in our world today for that suffering to be happening. And that's somewhere where I know that I can and should be changing lives. But I also know right now that there's 16 lives that wouldn't exist if I hadn't have done something to help before. And that's amazing, because to know that where I'm at now in my life, to know that I have made that difference is incredible. And that's something I want to be able to share with other people too, and say right now I need help to continue to change their lives and help their lives. But to know that with very little effort, we can save. Like, we can wake up in the morning and say, oh, that's amazing. Like, we can do this. With very little effort, we can help rebuild a house for these people at almost no cost to us, but we can put them back in a house. Right now, they're without one.
Yeah.
It's incredible. So yeah, I'm excited to tell people about it, because the story is, it's like a made for TV movie. It's just every week or two, it's like, you're kidding me. How could that happen? And you lived.
Yeah.
Like, it's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a few people who haven't lived, which is also shocking. But then somehow there's others who have, and it's incredible.
I really look forward to how compassionate living is going to unfold across the season. And as we take part of the podcast time each month to talk about transformational processes people can experience, and then the opportunity I have to talk about business with you and talk about our perspectives and how we really approach things and what we put to the forefront of our thinking to create that authentic and that moving experience that we can have in business and as entrepreneurs. I'm really excited for that process. And I can hardly wait for you to tell your story and for people to really understand how powerful we can all be when we take the right approach, when we take the time to listen, stop to ask questions, and have the empathy and sympathy for others by just being present with them. And like you said, when they just ask for, will you please pray with us? You know, it's a few minutes of time, and it's everything to someone else. So yeah. So thank you for sharing that part of the story. And I know we're going to go into recording to get that podcast underway. As we come to a close, usually I talk about tea at the beginning, and you talked about water and the water hippo today, which I don't want to give away any of that part of the story, but in your mug today, you have water. So do you want to talk a little bit about the intention you can put inside water, even if you didn't add tea to the cup?
In terms of the water for them?
Well, yep, we can do water for them. That would be great. So whatever you want to infuse into the water you have. And as I say that, I know that because I've just finished the recording with Jessica Lynn, which will get posted, which has a whole piece on water and intention. So this will segue nicely into that podcast. But what intention would you like to add to your water today?
Well, water is life. And I know for the Moyo family, water gives life to the people. Water gives life to the plants, to their gardens. Uh, it's everything. It's the start and it's the end. Um, it's God given. It is the start and the end. And um, so uh, it's something that um, without it, there's no life. With it, there's life. It gives hope. Um, it gives peace. It gives comfort. You can add to it, but without it, people are lost.
Mm-hmm.
So in having it with the tea, it also gives comfort.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a real relief.
Mm-hmm. So you have that in your mug. Is that one of your favorite mugs?
It's a newer mug, but it keeps it hot. And so for me, I like hot. I like warm. I'm always cold.
Yeah.
So warmer since doing my balancing my with the music with you.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But I like to keep my drinks warm too. So that's I have a lot of favorite mugs.
I guess as we go across the podcast, people will get to know that. I'm
Yes,
going to share. I
many.
used a clear glass today, and for those that are listening to the podcast, it's an auburn orangey colored tea. But I
Mm.
wanted to highlight this today because I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. And this is the tea that you and I created for our parents' 60th wedding anniversary. So this
Oh,
is
nice.
celebrating dreams. And I think that's a great way for us to finish this first podcast for the season because we want to celebrate dreams. We want to celebrate by having people think differently about starting to really transform how we approach living and how we approach business and how we definitely approach compassionate living and compassionate outreach for others.
Yes.
So cheers. Charlene, thank you for coming on this
Yeah,
journey. It's lovely to have you here.
absolutely. Thank you so much.
Hmm. So with that, I usually offer some kind of movement that people can do. And what I'm just going to suggest today is that they spend a few moments thinking about how this podcast will be able to transform the way they're thinking and to create the impetus for them to really go towards what they really truly want. And for the voyage that we're going to have with the Moyo family and how we're going to be able to make a bigger difference for more people in the world as we go forward with the podcast. Anything you'd like to add, Charlene?
No, I think just to remember to think outside themselves and to think of the people that they're working with and thinking about the other person to remember to it's not about you, it's about them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Beautiful. So, season 3, we are devoting to the transformational process that happens when people reach into their authentic selves and create magic. Our season has several publications, so we've talked about those today, and we hope they inspire and empower you to consider living your true heart's desire with love and compassion for others at the forefront. Thank you for joining us. This is Be Well with Michelle Greenwell, wishing you the courage to face your own transformation for the well-being of those around you. Have a great day.